have a look at this plan, which I think again will help us. Liberty, I say it's basically a secondary question, and it depends upon who you think man is, who you think, or whether you think God is, and what man is here for. Those are the primary questions, and liberty simply follows on those questions. In any case, what is liberty? Liberty is the absence of constraint, the lack of anything forcing me to do X or Y or Z. It divides into, firstly, the physical liberty and natural liberty. Physical liberty is the absence of external constraint. For instance, a cage, e.g. cage, or prison, chains, cage, chains. For instance, a bird. If a bird is not in a cage, and if there's no thread tied to a bird's foot, then a bird has physical liberty, because it's not being externally constrained. You and I have physical liberty because none of us are wearing handcuffs, none of us in prison, there are no locked doors, there's no force of any kind being of external material, physical force. Therefore all of us here obviously have, right here and now, physical liberty. If any of us was thrown into prison, we would no longer have physical liberty. If any of us was put in handcuffs, we would no longer have physical liberty. So physical liberty is a very simple affair. It's not difficult to understand. Right. It's different from natural liberty, which is the absence of internal constraint. For instance, instincts. And natural liberty is the same thing as free will. Now, the bird, if it's not in a cage, has got physical liberty. But no bird has got free will, because no bird is free from internal constraint. Every bird, like every other animal, is constrained by its instincts. Every bird is limited and controlled by its instincts. Every dog is limited and controlled by its instincts. Every horse is limited and controlled by its instincts. The horse, if it's out in the meadow and is free, or if out on the plain, it's got physical liberty. But it hasn't got natural liberty, because the horse will always do exactly what its instincts tell it. You see a dog coming up to the edge of a cold stream, and on the other side is a plate of red meat. You can see the dog coming up and then going back. Coming up because of the red meat, going back because of the cold water. The two instincts are fighting one another. Do you think the dog has free will to choose between which of those instincts will prevail? No, it doesn't. The instincts fight one another, but that's not free will. Because in the end, whichever instinct is stronger, the coldness of the water or the lusciousness of the red meat, one of those instincts will prevail over the other, and either the dog will swim across the water and get the meat, or it will walk away. But it's just a battle of instincts. It's not free will. Because the dog is controlled by its instincts, the instincts simply fight one another until one prevails. But a human being who's not drunk and who's not asleep and who's reached the age of reason, he has got free will. He's got a faculty which can override his instincts and determine which way the instincts go, whether to go with this instinct or whether to go with that instinct. The human being who's got reason is not constrained internally. If he's not constrained externally, he may not be constrained internally either. And it's implanted in man's nature. It's in man's nature. Man is a rational animal, therefore it's in man's nature to have free will. It's in the birds and the animals' nature not to have free will. It's in man's nature, because he has reason, to have free will. The Freemasons absolutely confuse that. Because the Freemasons want us all to believe that we're animals, or we're no better and no different from animals, because if we're no better and no different from animals, we will behave like animals. If we will behave like animals, then they can herd us all over the place like animals, which is what they want. The sheep of the Antichrist, that's what they want. So the Masons blur this all the time. You keep seeing television programs about how the animals are just like human beings. For instance, we're shown a picture of an aquarium in Florida, and somebody in a white coat, a scientist in a white coat with big spectacles, comes on and says, Folks, today we're going to listen to a conversation between Mr. Dolphin and Mrs. Dolphin. We've got tremendous listening equipment, and they've got, computers all over the place, and dials and buzzes and flashing lights, and the cameras on all of this, and it all looks very, very serious. And so, okay, now folks, we're going to listen. Do you know, that was Mr. Dolphin talking to Mrs. Dolphin, and Mr. Dolphin was saying, good morning. That was Mrs. Dolphin talking to Mr. Dolphin, and Mrs. Dolphin saying, get lost. You get television programs on this level. They are the levels. There is no way that the dolphins can talk like human beings or indulge in the exchange of reason between. There's nothing of the kind. Of course, animals make noises to one another, expressing their instincts, but that's totally different from the conversation between two human beings with reason. Totally different. But the Freemasons and the television are constantly pretending that there's no real difference. And they take the most reasonable-looking behavior of animals in order to try to prove that the animals have got reason, or that they take the most beastly behavior of human beings in order to prove that human beings haven't got reason. In any case, the Freemasons do everything to try to knock out that line, to knock out the difference between living beings that are internally constrained and living beings that are not internally constrained. But so this is physical liberty and this is free will, and the two things are quite different. It's common sense that they're quite different. The bird out in the fields has got physical liberty, it hasn't got free will. The bird in the cage has got no physical liberty and it's got no free will. The human being in a cage has still got free will, but he's lost his physical liberty. The human being out in the fields has got both free will and physical liberty. So you can find something which has got this and not that, that and not this, neither that nor this, both that and this. The two liberties are quite clearly very different. Okay, so the absence of internal constraint, for instance by instinct. Sometimes men's instincts can get very, very strong. In France, they've got, if a man kills his wife, there is a defense of, I forget what they call it, crime passionnel, I think. The instinct was just too strong, and therefore the guilt is diminished if he murders his wife. But if he did it out of just a wild passion, because as the passion gets absolutely wild, so the reason is diminished. Catholic theology considers that, but still, it's not. Catholic theology examines how far, if at all, free will is taken away in men by instincts. For instance, fear. Is a man responsible if somebody puts a gun to his head and he signs his name? And Catholic theology says, yes, he is still responsible. Obviously, it diminishes his, but I don't, if somebody puts a gun to my head, I do not have a right to sign, to give a signature which is a mortal sin. And I'm not excused from mortal sin. Obviously, I'm partly excused, but I'm still responsible even with a gun. So, the question of instincts and passions against free will is considered by a moral theology, but human beings are quite different from animals. So that's the difference between free will and physical liberty. Now, so that's the difference between 1 and 2. We want now natural liberty is like the Boeing 747 doing whatever it wants. That's you can cover it with moss, you can give it a coating of lead, you can strip the aluminum, you can make it into a shopping mall. Natural liberty means man's faculty to use his free will for anything he wants, absolutely anything he wants. That's natural liberty is wide open. It's just the faculty of free will. But now natural liberty divides. Natural liberty, the birds don't get into questions of morality because they've got no reason. The only creatures that get into questions of morality are creatures that have got reason. Therefore, the question of when I've got reason, which is free will, which goes with free will, or which free will goes with, when I've got a being that has reason, we're stepping into the domain of morality. I can make a good use of my free will, or I can make an evil use of my free will. If I make a good use of my free will, that's what we call moral liberty. If I make a bad use of my free will, that is what we might call immoral liberty or license. If I choose sin, then that's license or licentiousness. If I choose anything virtuous, that's moral liberty. Now, for man to go to his end, which is God, man will need moral liberty. He will need to exercise his moral liberty. If man has an end outside himself, if that end is God, and if God requires that I do what is morally good in order to reach him, then a man has got moral liberty. That man must use his moral liberty to do what's good and to attain his end. And if he has an end and refuses to do what's good, he will be punished for it. On the other hand, if man is an end in himself, then which liberty counts? If man is an end in himself, is there any difference between moral liberty and license? If man is his own end? David?
No, there's no difference.
There's no difference. Because there's no end, there's nobody out here telling me what's good or evil. I can do whatever I like. So the liberty of the man who's an end in himself is natural liberty. There's no difference between, if you suppress God, who as the end of man, who distinguishes between good and evil, and who tells me to do good and not to do evil, if you suppress all of that, then this just gets wiped out. There's no difference here. The difference between moral liberty and license is the difference between good and evil. If the difference between good and evil is wiped out, then all that you've got left is natural liberty. So, if the Freemasons deny the existence of God, or deny the importance of God, if they deny that there's a difference between good and evil, then the only liberty that's left is natural liberty, and I can do what I like. I have natural liberty and I can use it how I like. On the other hand, if man has an end outside himself, if he must do what is good in order to achieve that end, then he must make the right use of his natural liberty, which means he must confine his choices to moral liberty. He can choose between one good thing and another. He can choose between all of the good things, but he can't choose between what's evil, because that will take him away from God, and that means that he will crash. He will crash when it comes to taking off from the airport. Let us have a look now at Leo XIII. As the word liberty has got these three meanings: physical liberty, natural liberty, and moral liberty. And you need to be clearly distinguished between the three. The grandeur of liberty. Liberty, man's highest natural gift. What do you think that is? Which liberty do you think that is? Tony? Right. Free will, exactly. Free will, man's highest natural gift, is assisted by the Redeemer. Assisted by the Redeemer in order to become moral liberty, right? The Redeemer helps us make the right use of our natural liberty in order that we use it in a moral liberty, choosing only what's good. Natural liberty, man's highest natural gift, is assisted by the Redeemer and is cherished by the Church. The Church defends free will. Why does the Church do? Who attacks free will? Calvin, right. The Protestants are liable to deny that free will exists. Who else denies that free will exists in modern times?
Modern psychology.
Yes, definitely. Modern psychology denies free will. It says that we are the victims of our environment and or our instincts. Freud, we are pushed around by the id and the ego and whatever it is, and we don't have free will. Modern psychology tells us that we don't have free will. What's the advantage of not having free will? Accountability. I don't have to answer to anybody for what I do. If I don't have free will, I can go down to the bar every night and enjoy myself.
It's society's fault.
It's society's fault, that's right. So people like not having free will, which is why every now and again you get somebody who tells us that we don't have free will, but we do. So the Church, on the other hand, defends free will against the liars that say we don't have it. So free will is assisted by the Redeemer and it's cherished by the Church. But vitiated or false modern notions of liberty require from us a special encyclical. In what does the essential modern error about liberty consist? After all that I've said, in what does the essential, Doctor? That there's no difference between good and evil, that there's no God, that there's no end outside man, and that there's no good and evil laid down there's nothing outside of man which is the measure of his actions and which imposes upon him to do what's good and not to do what's evil. That's what is the heart of the modern idea of liberty. Man is his own God. Man is his own measure of what's right and wrong. That's what people think today. And if the people decide that abortion is okay, and if the people makes a law, if we the people make a law that abortion is okay, hey, then abortion is okay. Right?